9 months ago, the Soviet Union declared 3 cosmonauts dead. Their spacecraft was destroyed. Their mission was a failure. Their story was over. But what if every single part of that story was a lie? In the final moments of Star City Episode 7, one forgotten engineer notices something no one else on Earth could recognize. A mysterious transmission carrying a digital fingerprint that only he could identify. And in that instant, everything changes. Because if Sergei Nikulov is right, then the Venera 7 crew never died. So how did Sergei solve a mystery that thousands of Soviet scientists missed? Why was he the only person capable of decoding the signal? And does this shocking transmission finally prove that Valya, Sasha, and Lakshmi are still alive? Or is Star City setting us up for an even more heartbreaking twist? Because after Episode 7, one thing is clear. The biggest cover-up in Soviet space history is beginning to unravel. A man who was told his career was over just picked up a signal that no one else on Earth could have understood. Let's start with where we find everyone. Because the year that's passed between Episode 6 and Episode 7 has changed almost nothing, and also changed everything. 9 months ago, 3 cosmonauts were sealed inside a dying spacecraft and left to suffocate Valya, Sasha, and Lakshmi. The world was told it was a training accident. The engineers who built that ship were scattered, demoted, and silenced. And the one man brilliant enough to notice anything was wrong had been pushed into a windowless room to crunch numbers nobody cared about. So how does that same man end up staring at a signal that shouldn't exist? A signal that proves the dead are still breathing. That's the gut punch ending of Star City Season 1, Episode 7, and it's not just a twist for the sake of a twist. It's the moment the entire show flips its premise on its head. Everything you thought you knew about who won and who lost in this story just became questionable. Today we're breaking down exactly how Sergei Nikulov cracked the Venera 7 mystery, why it took him this long, what it means for Anastasia, and whether Valya, Sasha, and Lakshmi genuinely survived that explosion, or whether the show is setting up something far more painful. The Soviet space program isn't dreaming about Venus anymore. After the cover-up of the Venera disaster, the state quietly shelved deep space ambition and pivoted to something far less romantic, spying. The new station, Salyut 1, is dressed up in the language of scientific discovery. But underneath the paint job, it's a surveillance platform, photographing American territory and dropping the film back down to Earth in canisters. It's efficient. It's also sloppy enough that the Americans have already caught on, which is a problem the Soviet leadership desperately needs to bury. Running this new era is Radomir Petrovsky, a man who got the job not because he understands rocket science, but because he understands obedience. He's former KGB, and he sees Star City as a machine to be controlled rather than a dream to be pursued. And that distinction matters more than it sounds like it should, because the entire tragedy of Episode 7 is built on the gap between people who see space as a bureaucratic tool and people who see it as something worth dying for. Nikulov falls firmly into the second category, and it's slowly destroying him. He used to work alongside the chief designer on the kind of problems that could reshape what humanity understood about the universe. Now he's buried under paperwork that has nothing to do with exploration, watched constantly, and reminded daily that his talent doesn't matter to the people running this program anymore. So he does something quietly desperate. He asks a colleague to pass along a letter, hoping to land a teaching position at a university far away from all of this. Such a small human request, and it costs someone else everything. The colleague who agreed to help him vanishes from work almost immediately, clearly punished for even touching the request. Then Nikulov comes home to find his apartment torn apart, his belongings destroyed, and his own letter left sitting in plain view. It's not really a search, it's a message. The state is telling him, without needing to say a single word out loud, that there is no version of his life that exists outside their permission. Grief, ambition, escape. None of it is his to choose anymore. That kind of despair usually breaks a person. Instead, it's what puts him in the exact position to make the discovery that defines this episode. While reviewing what looks like routine data on near-Earth asteroid activity, Nikulov notices something that doesn't fit the pattern. He needs access to the comms room to check it, and normally he wouldn't get anywhere near it. But he manages to talk his way past the guards with help from an engineer named Stepanov, and once he's inside, he realizes he needs someone in orbit to help him confirm what he's seeing. That someone is Anastasia. Here's where the story becomes almost unbearably layered. because Anastasia isn't on Salyut 1 by accident either. After losing her husband Sasha in the Venera catastrophe, she'd retreated to a quiet, aching life on a farm, wheeled out occasionally for propaganda films that painted a smiling face over her grief. Her return to space isn't a reward. It's political theater, meant to convince the Americans and the watching world that this new station is about curiosity, not surveillance. The Soviet leadership is using her fame as camouflage. They have no idea they're also placing her exactly where she needs to be to uncover the truth about her own husband. When Nikulov reaches her through the comm system, she hesitates. Trust doesn't come easily in a world built on surveillance and lies, and she has no obligation to help a man asking her to fiddle with sensitive station equipment. But she remembers him. He's the engineer who once told her, mid-crisis, to puncture a hole in her own spacesuit to survive the LUNA-16 mission. That memory is enough. She agrees to run the tests he's asking for. And this is the technical heart of the whole reveal, so it's worth slowing down here, because the how actually matters. Nikulov doesn't stumble onto this by luck. He recognizes the anomaly because of something specific, an image compression algorithm that had been built into the Venera spacecraft's computer, originally designed to shrink high-resolution photos so they could be transmitted efficiently across the vast distance back to Earth. That algorithm wasn't generic Soviet technology, it was custom-built, and functionally it was his. When Anastasia adjusts SALYUT1's UHF receiver to the frequency he specifies, the signal that comes back isn't noise. It's compressed data, structured in a way that only that specific algorithm could produce. In other words, Nikulov doesn't just detect a mysterious transmission. He recognizes his own fingerprint on it. There is no other explanation the show allows for that particular data signature except one. The Venera 7 spacecraft, presumed destroyed, is still transmitting. And if it's transmitting, someone on board has to still be keeping it operational. Think about what that means for a second. This isn't a random ping picked up by chance. It's a signature so specific that only the man who helped design it could have possibly recognized it for what it was. Every other engineer in the Soviet program could have stared at that same data and seen nothing but static. The fact that it's Nikulov, sidelined, surveilled, and stripped of everything he loved about his work, who ends up being the one person capable of catching it, is not a coincidence the show glosses over. It's the entire point. The state discarded the one mind it couldn't afford to lose. So does that confirm Valya, Sasha, and Lakshmi are alive? Based on what the episode shows us, yes, at least as far as the spacecraft itself goes. The show tells us plainly that Venera 7 survived and is heading toward Earth's orbit. What it doesn't confirm, and what fans are right to be cautious about, is whether all three cosmonauts are still breathing inside it. And that's where the theorizing has to stay clearly labeled as theorizing. We know the ship functioned well enough after the explosion to still be broadcasting a coherent, algorithm-based signal 9 months later. That takes power, life support, and someone maintaining the systems. It's reasonable to read that as evidence that at least one crew member is alive and functioning. But a working transmitter doesn't automatically mean 3 working hearts. Could the crew have rationed oxygen to survive the initial damage? Could they have made it to Venus and back with catastrophic losses along the way? The show hasn't told us yet, and anyone claiming certainty about the crew's exact condition right now is filling in gaps the writers haven't closed. What we can say with more confidence is what this discovery does to the people around it. Anastasia's reaction says everything. She doesn't celebrate. She breaks down, caught between 9 months of grief and the terrifying possibility that grief might not have been necessary at all. That hesitation, that refusal to let herself hope too quickly, tells you exactly how dangerous false hope has become in this world. She spent a year building a life around Sasha's death. If he's alive, does that life even make sense anymore? There's a colder question sitting underneath all of this too. If Valya survived, he's not just a missing husband or a lost crewmate. He's a walking contradiction to everything the state has told its citizens. His survival isn't just personal, it's political. A government that built its entire narrative on a lie about dead heroes now has to reckon with heroes who refuse to stay dead. And that raises the bigger question we're sitting with. Is Star City ultimately a story about truth eventually surfacing no matter how hard the powerful try to bury it? Or is this discovery just setting up an even crueler outcome, where the state finds a way to silence the truth all over again before it ever reaches the public? There's also the matter of who already knows. Stepanov overheard the conversation. Other engineers in that comms room watched Nikulov panic in real time. Secrets in this world don't stay contained for long, and the show has already proven that Petrovsky's regime searches apartments over a single letter. What happens when they find out an engineer just confirmed that their government's biggest cover-up might be unraveling in orbit? That tension is really what the final stretch of Season 1 is built on. Not simply will the cosmonauts make it home, but what happens to a system built entirely on a lie the moment that lie starts breathing on its own. So here's the question worth leaving in the comments. If Valya really does make it back to Earth alive, is he coming home as a hero the state can't afford to celebrate, or as a threat the state can't afford to let live? Whatever the answer, Episode 7 has done something most shows struggle to pull off in a freshman season. It turned a devastating ending into a genuine second chance, without cheapening the grief that came before it. Sergei didn't get lucky. He got recognized in the one place the state couldn't erase him from, the math itself. And Anastasia didn't just help him find a signal. She may have just found her way back to the one person she thought she'd already lost forever. If this breakdown helped make sense of that ending, drop a like, subscribe for the season finale coverage, and share it with anyone still processing that final scene.